So I'd like some questions from you all, if you have any, about what we've discussed so far. If not, it's okay. Don't need to be doing unmuted. Don't want that. No, I want that. Okay, so then let's look a bit then. Let's talk about this word emptiness. I think that's necessary for us. I mean, most of us, we'd already studied and know all these terminology, and we can really go more deeply into into the topic of actual Mahamudra. Yeah. So it seems initially a bit abstract. Once we get used to it, it's not complicated. So the Buddha's telling us that the way we think things exist at different levels is inaccurate, which is interesting. It's a bit like you've believed 1 + 1 is 3 for so long. This is really the one interesting way of putting it, is you've believed, no, for example, you say you've believed that a $50 note is 500. You've believed it for so long that it actually looks like 500. You see 500. And that's really what Buddha's saying. The delusions in the mind for so long, we become fully imprinted with them from the second of conception in our mother's womb. Didn't learn it from our mummy, you know. All these misconceptions of this primordial ignorance, this maripa, this ego grasping, that just totally believes there's a real solid, definite, pointable I in here. And indeed, he, totally believes. And therefore, on the basis of this is attachment, hunger, this emotional hunger to get what that fantasy I wants, and then aversion and panic when it doesn't, and all the other afflictions he talks about. All of these, he's saying, are deeply ingrained in our mind from habit. And they're so ingrained, it's like now a 50 note appears as 500 to you. You believe it's 500. You expect to get 500's worth. And then what is the result? Disappointment. So in a sense, this is attachment. Attachment, when it doesn't get what it wants, is disappointment. So therefore, we have this constant life after life of disappointment, dissatisfaction, things, no matter how hard we try to get happiness, we never get it because we misconceive things. I mean, it's an odd way to put it, but this is exactly what he's saying. So all he's saying is that what we think exists doesn't. In the things, the way they appear to exist, they don't. That's what he's saying. So in other words, he's trying to train us to see. We have to learn to see that what appears to be $500 in reality is 50. I mean, it's a simple example, and we can see that. In other words, if for so long you've believed that a certain person stole from you, you've believed it all your life, and you see them in an ugly way, you always assume this is the truth. When you first hear that it's not true, it's almost impossible to believe it. You don't want to believe it because you've got this picture of a person, We understand that idea, that it's believing something that isn't true. That's what he's telling us. We're believing that the way I exist, the way things exist, the way they appear to us is not accurate. That's essentially what he's saying. But because the mistakes are so ancient, it's really hard to see it because we're caught up we're invested in these lies and have been for many, many lifetimes, he says. That's why if we just learned it in this life, then it'd be easy to fix, So the meaning of this ignorance is very interesting. This maripa, the primordial delusion, such that when it is uprooted in meditation like Mahamudra, that brings us the realization, that seeing the truth that I doesn't exist, which is what emptiness refers to, that I doesn't exist, isn't there. This ignorance, which is the cause of the problem, is kind of like, it's sort of like double trouble ignorance. Normal ignorance is merely, you say, what's 1 + 2, Robina? And I'll say, I don't know. That's regular ignorance. Now, if that were the ignorance that Buddha's describing, we can easily fix it because there's space in the mind to hear the truth. But when this is extra ignorance, is not only do we not know that 1 + 1 is 2, we believe it's 3. and we've clung to this lie. So we literally believe in the lie of permanence, believe in the lie of no cause and effect, believe in the lie that our mother made us, believe in the lie, and I'm not being rude here, that we're the product of a creator, believe that our eye is intrinsic, believe there's no cause and effect, believe that things are permanent and never changing, believe that that there is an intrinsic nature. So it's lie upon lie upon lie. Misconceptions in the mind are ancient, and we cling mightily to this is the truth because of habit. Even though these misconceptions, buying into these misconceptions is exactly why we suffer. So why we suffer, Buddha says, is because we are believing in misconceptions, because we're addicted to them. We're addicted to them. We're addicted to those lies. It's a way of saying it. So this ignorance is this extra level of ignorance. Not only do we not know, that the thing that there is no intrinsic I. That's an abstract way of putting it. Not only do we not know that there is no intrinsic I, not only do we not know there is no intrinsic I, we believe there is. And that's the double piece. And that's the one that's hard to change. I mean, if you believe certain things, totally cling to it, that's a much harder ignorance to remove than merely not knowing. Not knowing is easy to fix. I'm sure we could get enlightened in a year if we were merely not knowing. It's believing in the lies, that's extra level. And that's what makes it so intense. And it's just habit, that's all, not mysterious. You think, why would we believe in something that causes us suffering? It's because we're addicted to it, because it's habit. And that's the nature of all the misconceptions. Their nature is grasping, all of them. The deepest root, the deepest one, the primordial one of believing in an intrinsic me is intense grasping. And its nature is fear. Psychologically, this is most fascinating. Its nature is fear. And all the other delusions that come as a result, attachment to get with that fantasy I wants, aversion when it doesn't, and all the other dramas, they're all rooted in fear, which is the physical experience, the actual experience of suffering day to day, anxiety and worries and fears. This is the character of these misconceptions, and that what Buddha is saying, like we said yesterday, I think, that the character of the virtues is joy and happiness. And we kind of know that. Some people who are just more happy, more easygoing, more relaxed, don't get so jealous, don't get so angry, are just more happy. That's because virtue prevails in their lives. That's why. If you meet people like, like say in our case, in being Buddhist exponents of this path, who seem to be the proof of the pudding, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, for example, is well known, anybody can see, no matter how bad it is in Tibet, no matter how much unbelievable dramas over his life he's had, you'd think he'd be having a mental breakdown every day. There he was since he's 16 years old, been running that country, Look at the suffering he had to go through, the dramas and the terrible things that happen. And still every day, Tibetans are coming over the mountains from Tibet, He's like their father and their mother. Incredible, unbelievable amount of responsibility all his life. But we can see he's a happy person. He tries to get us to see that he's a regular guy who gets angry, but he can't fool us somehow. He's a happy guy, This is one of the simplest results of practice. And we all know it. If you see people who've got lots of attachment, lots of anger, not blaming them and not blaming them, but just observing it, it is evident they're intensely suffering. A person who's angry is a really suffering person. A person who's jealous is really suffering. A person who's really attached to things is really suffering, tormented. But of course, in their minds and in our minds with our suffering, we believe it's everybody else's fault. And that's the worst, most schizophrenic misconception of all, They say the bodhisattvas have the greatest compassion for us. Forget about not realizing emptiness, because we don't realize cause and effect. The law of karma, We believe everybody else is the problem because of these misconceptions. That's why we suffer, Buddha says. It's an interesting point. It's not the analysis we use in neuroscience, that's for sure. It's not the analysis we use in ordinary psychology. And that's the interesting point in Buddha's psychological approach to life. The way we deal with our suffering in our psychological models is we try to unpack the past. We think the source of our suffering today is in the past, which is reasonable because the past obviously plays a role. But because we believe our suffering comes from the external world, we have to unpack this external world. What mummy did to us, what daddy did to us, what the Catholic nuns at school did to us, because there we'll find the secret to why we're suffering now. The Buddhist approach is very extraordinary. If you're practicing properly, you don't need to look in the past. You look at the present, not even the events. You look at your mind. That's the unique thing to the Buddhist psychological approach. You learn to see your mind. You learn to see the anger that's there, the jealousy that's there, the attachment that's there, the anxiety that's there. They're the source of your suffering. They're the source of your suffering. Sure, people did bad things to us, but our mind is ours. And it's a very direct approach. You go into the mind to find the source of your pain. You know, it's a very interesting approach. That's why the job of being a Buddhist is changing your mind, reconfiguring the conceptual stories in here. So we start where we are, simply begin by understanding the conceptual story that attachment is, that aversion is, that jealousy is. These already are very, very hard to see. And then that leads us to the one of getting to the root delusion, the misconception of the I itself, you know, which is the source of all the others. And that's why you can't just leap into this emptiness one. You've got to go through the stages of practice. Of course, as Terry says, the Zen approach is, you know, it's not a process. And this is why Mahamudra is like that also. Mahamudra is one of those approaches where you go directly to the experience. So there's different approaches, you know. But the word emptiness itself really throws us, and it's so important to understand the use of it. And I always use these simple examples in daily life. The word simply, when something is empty, it just means that something's not there. That's all it means. It's empty. My cup's empty. These are regular, ordinary, as Lama Zopa says, ordinary emptinesses. Something is empty. The room is empty. My cup's empty. My bank account's empty. You know, we understand those words. They're very simple. It means that something is not there. That's all it means. So what Buddha's saying is, something we think is there isn't. And what we think is there, although we don't realize it because it's so subtle, is an intrinsic me. So, of course, we have to learn what an intrinsic me means. Just like Adam asked, let's talk about the object to be refuted. So if you don't know what it means, Buddha's saying we believe in an intrinsic me. We believe in an inherent me. We believe in a me that's is not dependent. We don't know what those words mean. It's puzzling. So it's like, look, what is an iPad? If you don't know what it is, you can't search for it. You better learn first what an iPad is, then you can search for it. And that's easy because an iPad could exist. But this one, an independent I, can never exist. It's a very utter one, you know. So the absence of something. It is abstract in the way of talking. It's an abstract way of talking. But this is where we get back to the business I said before about how when you first learn Buddhist psychology, you learn the different terms that are used for that which exists. The mind's job is to cognize things. So if the deluded mind is involved, it's cognizing things that don't exist. That's why it's called deluded. Delusional means you're believing in something that you're not in touch with reality. It's a great word. So when you're full of attachment, you're deluded. Attachment's a delusion, a misconception deep in the mind, coming from the root delusion of believing in an intrinsic me, which in its character is miserable and cut off and bereft and lonely and separate and concrete. And the emotional hunger that comes from that is what attachment is, always looking for something out there to fill up the gaping hole. So that all that neediness is dumped onto the cake. And the cake appears to you as extremely delicious because attachment is seeing it that way. And then attachment believes that when I get it, it'll fill up the gaping hole. So all of that, Buddha says, are lies. They are lies. They're totally spontaneous. So that what the mind is cognizing when it's through the lenses of attachment is the phenomenon, an intrinsically delicious cake that doesn't exist there. It's very simple. It seems odd, but it's a simple way to put it. If you're colorblind and something is pink, but you see it's blue, then a blue thing doesn't exist. It's a misconception. So what you're cognizing is not true. But if you're colorblind, it's impossible to know you're colorblind. And that's really a good analogy. We don't know there are these delusions in our mind because they're the only things we're familiar with. It's not as if we have 5 minutes of total clarity. If somehow for 5 minutes you saw the truth and it was really not blue, then you'd be remembering every time you saw it blue. Don't believe it, Robina, I know it's pink. But you only ever see it as blue. So these delusions are so pervasive, they're only ever in the mind to one degree or another. It's not as if you have truth for a few minutes and suddenly go back to the lies again. No, these are kind of utterly pervasive. So what we're cognizing isn't true. So whatever exists is what the mind cognizes. And Buddha says our job is to learn to cognize that which exists. So in this business of emptiness, which is sort of a negating way of talking, an abstract way of talking. So for example, the simple example I always use, when I pick up my cup, and go to drink, I'll go, oh, it's empty, we'll say. And you'll know perfectly well what I mean. But we've got to ask, in this case, empty of what? Well, we know because we expect tea to be there. Pretty obvious, not an elephant. So I find it interesting to see that this emptiness business is directly related to what you expect to be there and the shock of finding it's not. That's the experience. So in a simple example like this, you expect your tea to be there. So when I go like this, I get shocked. Oh, my God, my cup's empty. You know, you think $500,000 is in the bank. You believe $5,000 is in the bank. You believe it totally. And then you open up the account and there's a zero there. You won't see zero, or you'll see zero first, but the millisecond later, you'll go, oh my God, where's my precious $5,000? So this is the point now. The phenomenon, the object that your mind just cognized is the absence of $50,000. The object I just cognized is a vivid, real phenomenon that does exist. The absence of tea. So it is an abstract concept, but it's very vivid when we hear it this way. And this is not playing with words. This is exactly how we have to get our head around it. We have to cognize the absence of something. That's what emptiness refers to. It's just shorthand for the emptiness of an independent I. We have to cognize that. We have to recognize it. We have to recognize the I we think is there isn't. That's what it means. So the phenomenon we want our mind eventually in meditation to cognize is the absence of the I we always thought was there. So it's vivid, clear type of, it's abstract, but it's very real. We have to cognize, we are that moment cognizing the absence of tea. You say, oh, my cup is empty. Or you say, oh, there's no tea in my cup. But put another way, in my cup, there does exist the absence of tea. That's the way the terminology is used. It's not just playing with words. If I'm convinced my iPad is on that table, I'll say to him, don't you lie to me, Adam. I know my iPad's on that table. You know, I go in and I look at all the iPads, and I immediately see. What I see is my iPad's not there. What I see, the object that appears to me, is the absence of my iPad. That's how to use the term. That's how to use the concept. It's not difficult when we understand this. And this is the point now, the only person who's going to notice the absence of tea is the person who expects there to be tea. And the extent to which I believe this tea should be there is the shock of the discovery of the absence of it, which is why they say, Lama Zopa says, the greatest yogis, in the depth of their meditation, after all the years and years of hard work and practice and purification, finally, one day, the penny will drop. And there'll be that first moment when they see directly at the subtle level, non-conceptually, nakedly, crystal clear, they will vividly see the absence of the independent I. But there never has been, isn't, and never could be that kind of I, the I they believed in since beginningless time, which is the source of all suffering. And as Lama Zopa says, the greatest yogis, it is the most sublime bliss in the universe to discover that truth. And that's the point. It's not discovering nothingness. This is the grossest mistake when we hear the word emptiness. It means nothingness. And that's the mistake we make. As soon as we hear the two truths, there's no I, but there is an I. We go, oh, well, there's no I, then what gets reborn? If there's no I, then what the hell happens? Why bother? Because that's how we hear it. We hear it nihilistically, you know. Doesn't mean that at all. So this holiness says when you do the kind of the, you know, in the sutra teachings, when you first have to step, the 4 points. And the Mahamudra approach is slightly different, like I said. It's more analytical, the other approach. The other approach, the first point is the object. You have to establish what it is. You have to discover it doesn't exist. And they call it the object to be negated. That is to say, an independent I. You have to recognize what that is. And then the next steps are you have to do the searching for it. You have to establish clearly in your mind how your fantasy I appears to you. Because we're living with it all the time. This is a difficult one. And then you have to establish it's not there. And then the thing is, like with the iPad, there's only 2 options. There's either my iPad there or there's not. So especially from my experience, because, you know, I want my iPad. I'm attached to my iPad. I believe it's on that table. I go in there and I get a shock. And this is the interesting point. The more I expect my iPad to be there, the more panic-stricken I am to find its absence. That's the thing. I remember as a little girl, we had, you know, your mummies and daddies have knickknacks and things. Actually, I've moved into a place in New York City and I've never had a home in all my 79 years. So I have no knickknacks. It's very funny. Somebody said I look like I'm living in an art gallery. I have no knickknacks, you know. You don't go around buying knickknacks, do you? Somehow people gather knickknacks in their house, don't they? Maybe they come from your mother and father, I don't know, but I've got no knickknacks. You know, I've got holy beings and statues and a couple of pictures. You know, I've got a few things in my. So I've got knickknacks. I've got knives and forks. Are they knickknacks? Not really. Anyway, my house, I've got no knickknacks. But we had in our home, I remember we had this pair of polar bears, 2 polar bears, little ceramic polar bears, you know, I remember as a kid. And you just take them for granted. You always just see the things there. You don't notice there's 2 polar bears. But one day I walked in and I noticed. And I'd noticed the absence of one. I noticed it like that. Do you understand me? I noticed it like that. Oh, where's the polar bear? So that I know, so there isn't the presence of one polar bear, but because I expected there be 2, I saw the absence of the other one. I remember that experience. That's what we're talking about. We understand the experience. The absence of something. I mean, it's in our lives, it pervades our lives. When you're lonely, a lonely person is only ever seeing the absence of something, aren't they? That's the glass half empty person, always seeing the absence. And this is not a nice absence, this is a miserable absence. I mean, discovering the absence of an intrinsic I is the best bliss on the planet. But the idea of an absence of something is what we comprehend. You know? So if you're lonely, like, you know, if Adam and I've been together for 45 years and one day he leaves a note, I've left you for a younger version, then guaranteed in my house, all I will notice is the absence of Adam. But if you've never heard of Adam and you walk into my house, you won't see the absence of Adam. And this is why this absence, it's kind of an abstract phenomenon. It's not something you can taste or touch. You get my point? That's why they talk about emptiness being not an impermanent phenomenon. It's very abstract. You can't touch it, taste it, or smell it. But it's as real as can be. Do you hear my point, people? So to get our head around this idea of the absence of something is very necessary. So that's why, and this is the point now, nothingness is like nothingness. But the emptiness is the absence of something. It's very different. I don't just look and go, oh, there's nothing in my cup. I don't say, oh, there's nothing in my cup. I don't say that. I say there's the absence of what I think should be, which is my tea. That's a very, very different phenomenon. And that's the crucial point to get about emptiness. So in this analysis that you do, first you establish what you think the I is, then you have the 2 options. Either I is oneness with all the bits and pieces. So you have to do the analysis, use logical arguments to prove how that's not viable. And then you do the other one, or the option is the I is separate from. So that's, you know, Terry made that point about what all the cup is a bunch of bits and pieces. You do that analysis, you know. And so the conclusion will be, if the I is neither oneness with nor separate from, the only conclusion you can come to is that that I that you're looking for, an intrinsic one, doesn't exist, and that's when you get the emptiness one. But it's not as if there's nothing. So one of the practices, is to you search. You have to do that because you first establish what you think the I is, this independent thing that's independent of the mind calling it that, or even more simply, the one that's simple to talk about is the I that's a piece, a special piece that's, up above the liver and over by the kidneys or something. It's got to be somewhere. And we certainly know that the parameters of the search have to be this body. You're not going to look for my I in the computer, for God's sake. You have to look for the I, you have to establish the parameters of your search. And that's the parts. And that's the body and the mind. The body and the mind. They are parts that make up the I. So we believe totally the I is in there among those parts, that it's another part along with those parts. And that's the analysis. And so we then one of the practices is you in your meditation, you break down these components. You imagine getting rid of all the parts of the body. You put them out there as little piles, and you deconstruct yourself until eventually you're going to find either of two things. There will be that little I hiding behind the left breast that was trying to not be found. Aha, there it is, and you chuck it out. You don't need it. Or you will find the absence of it. And that will be the vivid experience, like me seeing the absence of the polar bear. You hear the fact? That's a really vivid one. I remember it. I saw the absence. I noticed the absence of the polar bear. That's an obvious experience. Of course I'm going to notice the absence of Adam based upon what's in the mind. It's not something you just go and point out. Oh, there's no Adam in the room. The only person who's going to notice that is me who wants him there. So we get that idea. And it is abstract. Because if you visit me, you're not going to notice a big hole where Adam used to be. Oh, where's Adam? No, you won't notice that. It's conceptual, but it's real. The absence of something. Emptiness, same meaning. So what is it we're looking for? We're looking for the method is to identify first. This is the typical approach. It's the same in the Mahamudra, but slightly different, and we'll go through it again. This is a more intellectual approach. First, you establish what you think I is, and that's the toughest part, because it's so much a given that it's there. It's hard to see it. So you get a feeling of how, and that's why you have to study and understand the words, dependent arising, So this is one about the parts. The three different levels in which Buddha talks about, particularly arguing with the Hindus before him about how things exist. So these three levels of dependent arising. Because the concept of there being an independent I is an I that's not a dependent arising. And there's three levels at which things exist interdependently. The first is cause and effect. So the very first level is that there is no I that exists independent of causes. And that is actually one of the teachings. There is this soul, or Atman they call it, is indeed not caused. That's how they refer to it. It's uncaused. It's like some sort of special characteristic. It's not changing. Well, Buddha completely argues with that. In the impermanent world, there can be nothing that isn't the product of causes. Not possible. Therefore, impermanent. The second level, one we're going to do now, which we do, is the second level is that we think there's an I, this is more subtle, that's independent of the parts. So it's the same. Terry's example of the cup, We say, my cup has parts. So that very sentence implies there's a thing that's a cup that is the possessor of parts. So that means there's more than one thing there. So that's how we talk. My cup possesses a handle. My cup possesses a base. My cup possesses sides, we'll say. Well, the handle is easy enough. Take the handle away and we've just got sides and a base. So we'll say my cup has a base and sides. So how many phenomena did I mention there? I mentioned 3. I said cup, sides, base. And we say each term with the same conviction. There is a cup that has sides and a base. So if that's true, you said 3 things you need to point out. 3 things. You just said it. So you can point out the base. And you can point out the sides. Where is the 3rd phenomenon, please? It's the cup. It's obvious you can't point it out. But we believe that. We don't think it this way, but this is exactly how we cling to the I. There's like an intrinsic cupness there. It's the owner of the parts. It's evident it's not there. It's clear. Terry's point was just that. Because if you take the sides away and the base, you find nothing. In that literal case, there's nothing there. You can't say there's a cup. So what is it? Cup is the name we give to the combination of parts and base. That's all it's saying. That's the conclusion you come to from this 2nd level of dependent arising. The same with the I. So the analysis that they say we need to do is, you have the made person, you are constructed, and then you start to pull the parts away, looking for that piece that you believe is there. That's why I like the IKEA example. It's opposite. You go buy, you think you're really excited to buy that atom on the computer, and you go to IKEA, they give you a box, for God's sake, of bits. You've got to build your own atom. It's the same as the opposite direction, that's all. So you have to construct the person. You put all the bits together. And they all do their job properly. And then you keep waiting to find that piece that you think there wouldn't be an atom without, which is an intrinsic atom, an essential little piece that's called I. And the thing is, when we look at the experience, we believe it is there. The pain when we say the word I is unbearable. To do analysis, it sort of seems like a joke initially. We have to do logic to argue with it. I mean, the Buddha is saying not only is there not a separate piece called I, you just don't need one. But we all think the job of the I, this is a really good analysis to do. We know for that cup to function, we have to know how to make a cup. And we know you have to have a base and sides, otherwise it won't fulfill the function of holding tea. It's pretty obvious. If you don't have a base, it's called a tube. It won't be a cup, it's obvious. According to the definition, it's got to hold tea. So you have a base and you have sides, and that's it. It's easy to prove. This one's easy to see. There is no 3rd component. It's pretty easy to see. So we can see with something as simple as a cup. With a person, it's much harder because we have this mighty emotion around it, isn't it? So we think of the cup as the owner of the parts. Well, that's how we think of the I. There's a real I in here that owns a nose and owns the ear. And we feel it's very personal, and it's very possessive, and it's very difficult when it gets insulted. So this is one little example which sounds so hilarious. Let's say Adam says, Robina, I don't like your nose. You better get it fixed, I will say, will be so upset. I'll say, how dare you insult me, Adam? And he will very rightly say, no, Robina, I didn't insult you, your eye, I insulted your nose. And equally, as Lama Yeshe points out, if there is a piece in here called I, a piece, like there is a breast, another piece next to it called I, hi breast, hi eye. If there is one piece like that, which we think, then when the nose is insulted, the I will go, oh, phew, I'm glad Adam didn't insult me. Poor nose, I mean, it sounds hilarious, but it is true. And this is the thing about how things exist interdependently. Exist separately or dependently. So I use the example of I have a cup and an iPad, So we can see very clearly there's 3 phenomena there. Like I said before, there's I, one phenomenon, 2, an iPad, 3, a cup. And you can easily prove that statement is a factual statement, because that means you have to point out 3 separate, in this case, and independent phenomena. Pretty straightforward. which means the cup does not depend upon the iPad for its existence. And Robina does not depend upon either of them for her existence. She could drop dead and they'll be fine. They could fall over and break and Robina's fine. That's easy to prove. Now this isn't the real point, now we get more nuanced. I have a nose and an ear. Well, without analysis, you can see it's true. But when we do the analysis, it's got to be the same as this. You've got to point out three phenomena. I, that isn't a nose or an ear, or doesn't depend upon a nose or an ear for its existence, and a nose and an ear that don't depend upon the other two. Well, you'll find the ear and the nose. They do exist independently. An ear can go deaf, a nose will still breathe. A nose can still breathe, and an ear will go, a nose can break, and an ear will still hear. In a simple sense, they are independent. But where is that piece called the I that is the owner? That's the one. This is this argument. That doesn't depend upon the existence of an ear and a nose, and indeed all the other bits and pieces. There isn't one. And you don't need one, a separate piece. So therefore, in other words, in this case, I does exist, but not independently. They are separate, but they're not. They're different, but they're different. But then you can't split them apart. They're different. They're different, but they're interdependent. They do exist, an I does exist, and it isn't the parts, but you can't separate them. It's a more subtle one than these other ones, It does exist, but it's different. You can't say I is the nose or is the parts, but you can't have an I without the parts. You can't have a cup without parts. So there is a cup, but not separately from the parts. That's the difference. That's the more subtle one. But you can't point. We want to, you see, our minds are so absolute. We want to point out a separate, independent everything. That's exactly how ego grasping thinks, and it's too absolutist. Things don't exist like that. Things exist interdependently. So this third one, which is led to by the second one about the parts, when you are certain there is no part separate from there's no part called I separate from the parts. And you also prove to yourself that the I is not the same as the parts, because the label cannot be the base. Because if cup were the same as the parts, you'd only have one phenomenon. So you would never say, my cup has parts. If cup and parts were literally synonymous, and I mean literally the synonymous, then cup and parts are synonymous. You would never say my cup has parts. Why would you? It's like saying my cup has a cup. How silly. I have an eye. If your eye is oneness with the knees and the anger, the parts, then you have to say that. You can't say that. So as many parts you've got, according to this logic, which is so silly to us, is as many eyes you would find, which is just not viable. So the conclusion is, I is a name we label upon the parts. Just like Panchen Lama told us in the text, the parts also are empty. Because in some of the Buddhist views, they do assert there's no intrinsic I, but they do assert there is an intrinsic part. They do that, but the Pasangika says no. In other words, we go, you're looking for the I within the parts, and you won't find. Well, then we sort of go, oh, phew, well, at least I've got parts. At least I've got breasts and legs. Phew, what a relief, something's there. No, because leg is also a name that you impute upon its parts. And you won't find a leg separate from the parts. And then you go, oh, well, my leg has parts. Phew, I've got a knee. No, Ni is a label that imputes upon its part, and so on until the billionth of a billionth of a billionth atom in the universe. Nothing, everything is dependent arising. You will never pinpoint down something. And ignorance wants to pinpoint. It's this absolutist type of mind that wants to pinpoint something. That's why in the West, in the science or something, they sort of put these, don't they sort of try to kind of break down all the atoms into the smallest phenomenon in the universe? Well, Buddha can tell you already from doing analysis that there's no such thing as a partless part. Not possible, not viable. So it annoys us. We want to pin things down. Ignorance wants to pin things down. It's very absolutist. Things don't exist like that. Because dependent arising is the logic to prove emptiness. And emptiness is as it says in the text as well, Panchen Lama, they come to the same thing. They're different ways of saying, they're different ways of saying the same thing. And we need to hear initially the two truths and use that as logic. And one really good way is when we think about dependent arising, we instead of thinking, well, the two extreme views we have right now is as soon as we see things, we grasp at them as being permanent and solid. And then as soon as we hear emptiness, we throw the baby out with the bathwater. Oh, well, there's nothing there. They're the two extremes we run between emotionally, So at least if we can even intellectually start to think something's dependent arising, proves it is empty, existing from its own side. We have to bring them together. And every time we say something is empty, to keep ourselves away from the abyss of the great mistake, we say, ha, that means it's dependent arising. Then we're on the right track. Then we are on the right track, Nagajuna says. That's why His Holiness's advice, like I gave you just before lunch, so simple it's a joke. How do you apply emptiness to daily life? Simple, he said. See things from a different point of view, meaning when ignorance is prevailing, it's this fundamentalist ignorance. This fundamentalist ignorance is the absolutist mind that says this is this, and there's not a millimeter of space to see anything from any other point of view. And we all can look at your suffering when you're fighting with somebody. That's exactly how it is. I am right and you are wrong. That is the absolutist way of the wrong view of the fundamentalist function of it's fundamentalism. It's a great term, fundamentalism. That's exactly ignorance at the worst level. There's not a millimeter of space to see anything from any perspective whatsoever. That's the absolutist type of the way ignorance functions, which is why it's so suffering. And that's suffering because things don't exist like that. Things exist interdependently, just like Terry said about the cup. And the more we experience the truth of that, the more spacious our mind becomes. So the one of seeing something from another point of view means getting past the absolutism, having the courage to dare to think, well, just maybe, the ugly husband, that's just maybe there's another way to see it. It's a miracle to do this, but it's very hard because we want to believe in our view. So see it from another point of view. Straight away, you're seeing. When you see something from another point of view, that's the point. Each second, the mind is cognizing something. And in the moment when ignorance is prevailing, it sees an absolute this. But as soon as you see it from that point of view, it's a different thing. It's not the same. And that's why they say, everything is empty. Everything, even negativity. There's no ultimate, there's no, inherent good, and there's no inherent bad. This is logical. But the misconception about that is we think, therefore, there's no good and there's no bad. And we throw the baby out with the bathwater. Well, conventionally, there is good and there is bad. There is up and there is down. There is short and there is long, but not intrinsically. They're dependent arisings. And they're good examples. You cannot have up without down. You cannot have good without, the usual kind of way we think, So they are relative realities. There is virtue, there is non-virtue, and you define them. But from the perspective of emptiness, he says, from the perspective of samsara and nirvana, So we should look then, well, how is it that on the one hand, Buddha tells us that one of the negative actions that we should try to refrain from, because it'll cause us suffering, is to kill. So killing is a negative action. Why? Because it harms others. And why for ourselves? Because it's done out of anger, and because with karma, everything we think and do and say programs us. So Buddha would exhort us to try not to kill, please, for our sake and the sake of others. So then we suddenly hear emptiness, and that we hear that killing is a dependent arising as well, and that killing therefore is empty of existing inherently. So we think, oh, there's no killing after all. Oh, good, I can kill. Great. That's nihilism. No way. Doesn't mean that. So how is killing a dependent arising? It's very clear. The action of killing involves an I who thinks I will kill that mouse, and involves a mouse who, when I do the action, dies. There's a whole bunch of, so that the component, there's a phenomenon called Robina killing a mouse. That's the name of this phenomenon, okay? The action is called Robina killing a mouse. That's the name of an action. There's a name of phenomenon called cup. There's a name of an action called Robina killing a mouse. So it is a dependent arising. So what are the, so it consists of parts. One part of that action, of that thing is called Robina. One part is the mouse. One part is the mind saying, I will kill. And one part is the mouse dying. There's a bunch of components there, just like there are a bunch of components here. Therefore, the action of killing exists in dependence upon those various parts all being together. So let's say Adam has a mouse. And let's say Adam kills a mouse and Robina kills a mouse, and you look on and it looks identical. There's Adam killing a mouse, naughty Adam. There's Robina killing a mouse, naughty Robina. So now let's look at his action. There's various components too when I do the action. In order for that to be a negative karma of killing, to drop a seed in my mind that will ripen in the future as my suffering, which is the law of karma, then there have to be four things in place when we each kill the mouse. One is there has to be a living being. How can it be called killing if the mouse is already dead? You didn't kill a mouse, it's already dead. Well, there's a rock there instead. It's not called killing a mouse. So the first one, there has to be a living being. One phenomenon, one part of this whole thing. Then there's the second part, our mind's involved in it. And there's two main bits there, and this is the crucial piece. Let's say in my mind, there's the intention to kill, I will kill the mouse, and then you have the motivation, which is the key factor that determines whether or not the action of killing that I do qualifies as a negative action, which will then put a seed in my mind, a negative seed, which will then program my mind, and then which will cause me future suffering. The key factor is the motivation. So my typical one would be anger. How dare a disgusting mouse be in my house? So my motivation is anger. My intention is to kill, and then my motivation is anger. It's the second component of the four, and that's in place. Third, I do the action, kill the mouse. Fourth, the result, dead mouse. Now, Adam's is exactly the same, except for one piece is different. One piece. His motivation is compassion. He might be misled because he thinks, well, if I kill the mouse, the poor thing, because he just stood on it and it's suffering. He thinks I better kill it properly now because the poor thing's suffering. But, compassion's not enough. You need wisdom. But he meant well. So there he is, there's a mouse there, same, tick the box. Then his intention, I'll kill the mouse, same thing, but motivation, compassion for the mice. Third, he does the action, mouse is dead, and he's relieved the poor mice to stop in suffering. But those are looking identical, but they're completely different phenomena. Because why? They're dependent arisings. So his is not a virtue, his is not a non-virtuous action. There's almost no negative karma there because he meant well. The mouse might go from the frying pan to the fire. That's another discussion. So it looks identical, but they're dependent arising. So killing is a dependent arising. Therefore, it's empty of existing from its own side as inherently negative. So inherently negative or inherently positive doesn't mean negative or positive. Inherently, nothing can be inherent. That's the point. Nothing can be set in stone. So that's fundamentalist. When you have fundamentalist religion, or fundamentalists like the politics, the communists, for example, they're very fundamentalist. Absolute good and bad, absolute this, absolute that. We can see it with people. It's the worst quality possible. That's the predominance of this ego-grasping view. Ignorance, absolute, no dependent arising. We all can see anybody who's fairly spacious in their mind and isn't so angry and isn't so jealous. They're in touch with dependent arising. Because that's reality. You don't impose dependent arising upon things. Things are interdependent. Things exist very interdependently. When all the bits and pieces are working nicely, then the world exists. Are we communicating? So, we talk about, well, you're looking for people in prison. For example, prison, if you define a prison, I've been to a few, you can say it's an ugly house where you're sent when you're naughty and you can't escape. It's a pretty good definition of prison. But I know some people in prison who are really happy guys. You think that's a bit weird. How could they be? It's a horrible place. Because they've changed their mind, so it's dependent arising. You see it differently. You see it differently. That's all. You see it differently. My friend Sunny, accused of murdering 2 policemen with a husband. Husband got executed, head burst into flames, lost her children, mummy and daddy died, 17 years on death row, and she's innocent. And she said, at some point, finally, I realized I couldn't change anything. But they couldn't take my mind from me. So I decided, I'm not a prisoner, I'm a monk. I'm not in a cell, I'm in a cave. So guess what? She saw it differently. Now, this is the point. If prison were inherently bad, it's got nothing to do with how you see it. It's set in stone, bad. Then no matter how much you change your mind, it's still bad. Buddha says things can't exist like that. We know this every day in our experiences. That's what it means, emptiness, dependent arising. It's ordinary experience, And we can see the people who've got tick the boxes for happy life, beautiful house, gorgeous partners, lovely children, money in the bank. And we know some people, kill themselves because they're so full of despair. So you'd think, well, they've got a nice house and nice money in the bank. How come they're not happy? We can see it's true. We don't join the dots. They're sunny, happy in a nightmare, So we see it all the time. It's proving emptiness. It's proving things are dependent arising. It's proving, finally, the dependent arising is of how you label things. We can see that. So we have to discover the emptiness, the absence of something. Why? Because we believe it's there. That's all. But we believe what's there is there. So we have to discover it's not there. That's all. And it's tough. It's hard because it's so subtle. It's so pervasive. It's so absolute. And it's so ancient in our minds, Buddha says. And this is the suffering of every being in the universe. Every mouse, every ant, every dog, every human. This is what causes us suffering. So, okay, the typical, approach in the Lam Rim, excuse me, is that, you first establish the object to be negated, as they call it, the object to be, the object of, another term they use, that's good enough. So what it is, we think the I is, and this is the most hard part, an I that's independent of my mind, calling it that, or an I that's independent of the other parts, separate from. You have to catch it 1,000 times a day. And the only time the feeling of I arises is when it doesn't get what it wants. When the I gets what it wants all the time, it's just kind of, we're pervaded by kind of, give me more, give me more. We don't notice, It's only when we don't get what we want, when the I has a panic attack. And that's the time to catch it. When a person is mean to you in the traffic, when you get a shock. You instead of out there, if we get angry and point to the thing, catch it here, catch it, check it, see how it feels. That's the way to do. When you sit down to meditate, then in this meditation of searching for this independent I, the first thing you do, the Lamas recommend, you conjure a memory of having been hurt or insulted or offended, which is the time the feeling of I arises. And you try to catch it. And it's very subtle. And then you do the analysis, the logical analysis of it's either being oneness with or separate from. You do them different times, and then you get the conclusion. So it takes time. It's very rigorous logic. And indeed, at a subtle level, you certainly do your concentration meditation first. So the different way you do the meditation from that perspective, in the Lam Rim perspective, you'd have the 2 modes of meditation. So first, you've just been to your class. You've been listening to the teachings about dependent arising. So you take it either in your mind or in your notes. and you go sit down on your cushion and you first get some concentration. So here you'd concentrate on whatever you've practiced. You might take your breath. You might do your guru yoga and practice concentrating on the Buddha, and you get nice steady concentration. And then to the degree that you've cultivated any concentration, any focus, you now stop that meditation and you take the focus you cultivated, and now you go to the second mode, the insight mode, and now you would take the things you've learned, the concepts, quite literally, and then you would do an analysis quietly in your meditation. Well, therefore this, and therefore that, and this is that, and therefore this. And it's quite subtle. And the subtler your concentration, the subtler the analysis. And then and suddenly you get a flash, a moment of an insight. You feel it, you see it, and you stop the analysis, and then you focus one pointedly on that insight. That's how and the more concentration you get, the subtler you get, the deeper the insight, until eventually one day you have the direct, non-conceptual insight into the absence of that fantasy I, which you then absorb into with no thoughts. That's the typical approach of the regular sutra approach. Now, the Mahamudra approach is different, like we've been saying. The Mahamudra approach is you get your concentration, but your object of concentration is whatever is arising in your mind. And as Panchen Lama told us in the text, and like Terry said, you remove the thoughts, you stay focused, and slowly, as you get the habit of concentrating, the thoughts get less. The more you stir the water with all the thinking, the more it's turbulent. But if you stop the thinking, it calms down. So at some point, the object, and it's quite subtle, will be the clarity of your mind, this conventional nature. But you have to wait till you get that. Do the second one. You can try it. So when you've got some semblance of quiet, this is the difference now. You keep focusing on that mind. You never move from that. Whereas in the previous method, you would stop focusing on the breath and you would take the focus from your mind and you go to the second mode and you do the analysis and then the insight. But here, you never waver from focusing on the mind. And out of the corner of your eye, very subtle, like a little fish moving in water without disturbing it. A tiny wisdom, a subtle awareness, trying to catch the way the eye feels. It's very subtle, very subtle. That's the Mahamudra meditation. So the more subtle it gets, the more, and then you grab, let's say you suddenly get an insight of the absence of that I, and you hold that. That's how they do. So we can all try it. No harm in that. And then one day, the penny will drop. So the first actual irreversible realization of emptiness, is when that certain experience, utterly non-conceptual, it can't, as Lama says, it cannot be at conceptual level. It's a non-conceptual, which they call direct perception, which is necessarily at a much subtle level of your mind. And the first time you have that direct non-conceptual insight that's crystal clear, from that second you cut the root. You cut the root of the primordial delusion. That's the shift. That's the primordial shift we have never done until now. Once you've got that direct realization of emptiness, you've got to perfect it more and more meditating in your cave. But from that second, you can't go back because you've cut the root of ignorance. There's more work to do, but you've cut the root of ignorance. That's the beginning of liberation. And you cannot fall back after that, ever. And you never lose that realization, because once you've cut the root of something, more can't grow from it. It's very clear. Let's read some Lama. Okay, I don't think I'd like to read this. This is Lama talking about emptiness. His words are more powerful than mine. So chapter 8, before meditating on Mahamudra, establish what exists and what doesn't exist. So Lama's here talking from the classical position of Nagajuna, okay? So I'll just read his words. We're just a name. So this, let me do this, it's easier. So the great second century Indian scholar Nagajuna describes the way we exist. This is from the final view of Prasangika Madhyamika view, Madhyamika view. The combination of our five aggregates, our form, feeling, discrimination, non-associated compounded phenomena, and consciousness, is given a name. The name is a label, comes from a concept. That's it. That is the reality, conventional reality, no more. Of course, that sounds so disappointing, doesn't it? Oh, aren't I more than that? So, but the characteristic of ego mind, that's Lama's term for ego grasping or maripa, ignorance, or self-existence, all these terms, is that it's always dissatisfied with that reality. And this ego mind, perhaps it's better we say ego wisdom, because in a sense, ego is so intelligent, so skillful, completely knocks out our reality. We can also say that we're a combination of the six elements, There's different ways of describing the components. The usual four plus consciousness and space. So to these elements, a name is given. The name comes from the mind. The mind looks at this combination, then gives it a name, a label. And this is the conventional reality. It doesn't matter how important we hold it to be, the way it exists is no more than that. I mean it, no more. So the root text quotes Nagajuna, the individual is not earth, is not water, is not fire, is not wind, is not space, is not awareness, and is not all of these. Yet what individual is there other than these? So in other words, if we go looking for something more among each of the, the parts in here, no way can we find anything there either. If we just think even ordinarily, think of the parts like the physical and the mental, all your thoughts and all your bits and pieces of the body. That's all. You've got thousands of them, like I said, we're looking, as he says, looking for another piece in there called I. So in Buddhist terminology, this is the meaning of conventional. In itself, a phenomenon is not absolute. But the ego holds things as absolute, concrete. Ego wants absolute me. We hold on to an absolute I, which is totally non-existent. There's no absolute I, nor are there absolute six elements, or for that matter, mind, body, breast, leg, anger, love, not any of them. There are none scientifically. So when we understand this, we see that if something were existing from itself, that's how Lama always said it. We usually say in and of itself, from its own side. He says from itself, it couldn't change, In other words, if something was set in stone, Buddha's saying if something was set in stone, it can't even exist. It can't even exist. It's not even possible to exist, Nothing exists like that. So ego wants. When it's summertime and it's 100 degrees, the ego wants absolute reality, Coca-Cola. Becomes the absolute solution. This view is totally wrong. It exaggerates. When the ego mind cognizes something, ego mind is Lama's term for ignorance, maripa, ego grasping, this root delusion. When it cognizes something, there is no room to accept it as it is. Ego mind has to go beyond the relative way that the thing exists. For this reason, Buddhism emphasizes understanding interdependence, dependent arising, as the logic to prove emptiness. We already understand this to some extent. So he takes this guy who was there, this person called Scott. So take Scott, for example. We give the name Scott to the group of six elements sitting here. There is this combination here, and then we say the name Scott. Three things are involved in this process: your mind, the name, and the conventional reality of Scott's six elements. Okay, there must be some reason we say Scott. There is some reason, always there's some reason, but that reason is superficial. There's no absolute quality at all. This, I think, is really easy when you think of Sunny in prison. So conventionally, we would agree the definition of a prison is an ugly place where you're sent when you're naughty. Sometimes they'll be sort of fairly pretty. I remember a friend of mine in Norway, he wrote and said he was really looking forward to going to prison very soon. He had 2 years booked up and was in the country, and there was education and growing vegetables, and he was really excited. That was his prison. I don't know anybody in America who says they're looking forward to going to prison, I tell you. So it already proves prison's, not inherently existent. So Sunny, there she is in a cell. That's fact. There she is accused of murdering policemen. Fact. There she is innocent. Fact. There's facts, the conventional facts. But right there, she decided to see it differently. So straight away, everything changed because of that. So that's proof of emptiness. It's quite right there, proof of emptiness. There's no intrinsic bad prison. Right there. I think we can prove it every day. I used to do kung fu, right? And when we got punched, when we doing our fighting, and I say let's say Adam punches me, we were taught by Mr. Lee that I had to apologize to Adam because I got out of the way. So I didn't feel upset. In fact, I apologized to him. I didn't get upset at all because he punched me, or whoever punched who. I can't remember. Whereas if you normally punch in the street, you want to go sue somebody, you have ADID, you have PTSD, and you go to counsel for 42 years. What's the difference? Your mind, your interpretation of it. So obvious. It's not being silly, it's true. Remember when I was a radical feminist? I always talk about this story. I was a radical lesbian separatist feminist, actually. You couldn't get anything more radical than that. I'm always I went to the outer end of every philosophy I learned, And so I was this radical feminist. And I had a policy, this is in the early 70s in England, when I was really radical. It was very clear. My policy was that if any man said something in the street, and then it was very common, men would talk about your breasts or whistle or say something, I would walk up to them, shout at them in public, abuse their, what was between their legs or something, but very insulting. I just decided I'd do it instead of getting all upset. I would do it into my own hands, Of course, they'd be embarrassed, totally embarrassed, but no man ever hit me back, except one time. This guy in North London, I remember, I was walking down the street. I remember it was a Greek section of all these guys drinking their ouzo and everything, and their Turkish coffee, or their Greek coffee, sorry. Wouldn't be Turkish coffee, or it's the same coffee. So anyway, this fellow, very tall fellow, was eating his fish and chips, and he said something. So I walked back across the street and punched him in the nose, And then he got upset. And his fish and flips went flying, and so he started chasing me down the street. So I was running down the street away from him, and he got me, and he punched me in the nose. My earring broke, my glasses broke, but I wasn't upset in the slightest. In fact, I respected him. He was the first person to answer me back, So he hit me, and he hurt me, but I wasn't upset. So it proves it was empty, was how I interpreted it. It's sort of obvious every day. We have experiences like this all the time. We don't join the dots, Do you understand? Okay. I don't do that now. But that's always that remind. Now this reminds me of another example. This one's pretty tasty. This one, how when we realize that attachment, we haven't gone about attachment much, but attachment, the main delusion as a result of ego grasping. Attachment is like this incredible sort of hubris. Attachment is this huge sense of entitlement. That's what attachment is. So the typical one of, this is a typical example. This man, he was an older guy in another part of London, and he said something about my breasts. And I went up to him and insulted him, and he nearly burst into tears. He was really genuinely hurt, like really offended. And he said, if you don't want me to say something, why do you look like that? Now, okay, they could call that politics, it's true, but that's the kind of mind that completely believes a female shape, because attachment thinks that everything's there for your benefit. So if you're greedy for food, you think food's there for you, So men who are attached to girl shapes thinks girl exists for them. I mean, that's in all religion, they still do it in some religions, but when I was a Catholic, I went back to school. That's right. As a Catholic, we girls were taught it was my sin if a boy got excited. And that's, of course, behind the whole Islam thing, isn't it, with respect to religion. And that's coming from attachment. The male view that says a girl exists for his sake. I'm not being political here. You all understand it. But that to me was mind-boggling. And and that's really not a political issue. That's how attachment works. He assumed I was there for his benefit. So it was such a clear answer and so logical to him. But if you don't want me to say something, why do you look like that? It was incredible. That's attachment, not ignorance. Different. That really blew my mind. Okay, so take Scott. Okay, so there's no absolute phenomenon. There's something, something just occurred, like some wind coming. Scott is coming. All there is Scott is. It's just some interdependent phenomenon linked with the thought. Our superstitious conceptual thought says the word Scott. That's the point. It was obvious when you're really stuck in your misery, when you're really angry or really jealous or really attached. We know that things appear absolute and set in stone, don't they? You can't see past your own nose. It's so obvious. But if you're only slightly annoyed, there's some space there to change your mind, You can see it from a different point of view. It's sort of obvious every day. We can see this. So there's this combination, these parts, and then we give a name to it. That's it. You can't go further than that. You can't say Scott is special, but we are looking for more than that, something objectively existing. Our ego is not satisfied. See, that's the key thing about delusions. They decorate on top of what is there, things that aren't there. So delusions are like drama queens, They put all this vomit on top. They're highly emotional and pathetic, Attachment is this disgusting, repulsive, revolting, decorating deliciousness onto something. It's like piss and shit. But because you're in love with that person, and you know how revolting it is, because once you stop being in love, he looks disgusting to you, doesn't he? Do you understand? Because now you have aversion instead. So it shows how delusions exaggerate. If it's aversion to somebody, you can't stand the person you're married to. It's revolting to you. You'd have to have sex with him because you have aversion for him. And then you're in love with somebody else and they look like an angel. You faint with joy. It's so clear. Delusions are ridiculous, like these drama queens that add all this junk on top. Isn't it? Are we communicating? I mean, we should be embarrassed at how silly we are. And of course, you can see the danger here. Because we take attachment and aversion as utter givens and necessary components of an ordinary person. When you hear that you can rid your mind of them, it's natural when you start to get renunciation, then you become nihilistic. Oh no, would you like some tea, Adam? Oh no, I have renunciation. Would you like to go to a party, Adam? Oh no, I'm renounced. In other words, he becomes like an essenceless, boring person. You just chuck the baby out with the bathwater. So giving up attachment is necessary. You don't end up becoming nothing. You ought to have more love instead, Love should take its place, which is affection and kindness. That's easily we can misunderstand, renunciation. End up as if you end up being nothing. That's the nihilistic approach to just realizing emptiness. It can be a big mistake. So Scott does not exist in any of the elements of his body, in any of the parts of his mind. It's like a car before it's assembled, just like Terry and her cup. Lama didn't say that, that's me. It's just a bunch of things, right? It's not a car there. That combination of parts is not the car. It's the same with Scott. The combination of Scott's parts is not him. So now if we put Scott in front of a mirror, there are two things, right? The reflection of Scott and Scott in front of it. But in our judgment, we think, oh, Scott is the true one. The one in the mirror is just a reflection. It's not Scott. But from the point of view of the great yogis Nagajuna and Lama Tsongkhapa, within both of these spheres, the body of Scott and the reflection, there is no Scott existing. The reflection is not him, and neither is the bubble of his elements. Both equally are not him. Scott comes from the name, the label. That is why he is existing. Other people's concepts produce the artificial name, the label. Then Scott exists. I remember His Holiness one time said, when you go to the market and you see a bunch of oranges and then you buy 6 of them, suddenly they're my oranges. And when one falls on the ground, oh, my orange just fell on the ground. It's really sincere. It's true, isn't it? Oh, my orange. So for this reason, all conventional reality is produced by the superstitious mind. See, that's the thing that's hard to hear because we only know conventionality. We only know universes. We only know bodies and thoughts. But all of this is artificial for the Buddha, which seems kind of weird. So basically, if we all became Buddha, would there be universes? Of course not. They'd just be pure, all pervasive, all compassionate, all consciousness pervading wherever they're just pervading. But don't hold your breath. Okay. So between the elements and the name, the superficial view, that is the only existing Scott. We can't go further. All there is the totality of Scott, the non-existence of Scott, the Mahamudra of Scott. We want to go beyond the name, don't we? The conclusion is each of the elements individually is not Scott, and the group of them, the combination, is not Scott. Becoming Scott depends on the label. So for Sunny, the existence of that prison cell and that nightmare, supposed, is dependent upon the way she saw it. So therefore she responded accordingly, you know. She decided to change her mind. She had no method. She has no spiritual path. She learned yoga. She taught herself yoga, and she just decided to work on her mind, meaning to stop being angry and resentful and going crazy. So she said, I'd give myself 5 minutes to be raging angry, and then I would stop and go back to inner work. That's intense, hard work, isn't it? Really full on, you know, deciding. The miracle is that she could see that her mind, her thoughts, were the key to success. That's pretty incredible. That's such intelligence. I can't believe it, actually. Okay. So when we non-conceptualize, as Lama says, in meditation, our experience of Scott, our mind reaches beyond the conventions of Scott. We stay there a while contemplating, and then after our session, we open up to his atmosphere, his elements. He'll seem like a mirage. He's there or not there. It's real or not real. In other words, we can see this too. When you're really fixated and obsessive and concrete and solid and absolute, everything's kind of concrete. When your mind's more virtuous, more spacious, everything appears more relaxing, you know. It's sort of obvious. So here we talk about Scott. I use him as an example, but it's the same for each of us. We feel I'm so solid. I am this. I am that. We believe I am the important one. We hold a dualistic view of our own self. Our responsibility is to observe this view, the way ego mind grasps the I as self-existent, as solid, concrete, set in stone. Do I exist as I believe or not? We have to check that out. We really feel that somewhere within our body or mind, I'm here. This is a totally wrong conception. It means that we do not recognize how things operate conventionally, how they exist interdependently. We can't accept it. We feel that we have some absolute reality. Yeah. So this is interesting, this part. The conventional self exists only for the relative mind. So during Mahamudra meditation, we are not trying to destroy the conventional view of I. Anyway, this is not the problem. The great yogi, the enlightened one, Tilopa, said to his disciple Naropa, my son, you are not bound by awareness itself. You are kept in bondage by your concepts. Remember that all the emotions we have, all the dramas, all the anger, all the pain, all the anxiety, they all come down to being conceptual stories in our mind. And the degree of the emotion is the degree of the habit of them in our mind. That's it. In other words, the reflection of phenomena appearing in my mind isn't the problem. The problem is we stimulate the mind, we shake the mind with all the dualistic opinions. You are this and you are that. So we need to learn to not judge with such artificial concepts. This is good, this is bad. Yeah. So I want you to understand that the conventional I exists only for the conventional mind, a valid conventional mind. But ego mind feels that there is an I that's dependent, that isn't dependent, that exists without depending on any other phenomenon, that it's solid. That's ego's concept. Yeah. Okay. So we need to knock out the intuitive ego, Lama calls it. So the problem is, as long as we hold the concept that our self exists objectively within the 5 aggregates, separately, there somewhere to be pointed to, that such an I is existing from itself without depending on anything else, then we do not touch reality. We either overestimate or we underestimate. That's the two truths. We have extreme views now. If we underestimate, we become nihilistic. Oh, nothing's important. I might as well kill myself. And if we overestimate, we get all excited and drama queens, you know? So the unique skill of this Mahamudra meditation technique is that it banishes these two extremes, you know. Seeing things as absolute in this way, holding the concept of an independent I, is not intellectually created, made up philosophically. We haven't made it up. It's not coming, some clever person invented a philosophy, then we believe in it. It's not like that. You know, we could supplement one philosophical view about ego for another, but this will not solve our problem. We need to knock out the intuitive ego, this, you know, this primordial, you know, this simultaneously born ego, they call it. It is because it is so instinctive that it's so difficult to catch. In other words, the more you have done something, the more you think something, the more you do something, the more easy it becomes to do it, which is what we mean by instinct. So of course, in our culture, we don't think that. You know, when that little, you know, like a little, watch those animal shows on the television, on the computer sometimes, you know, and that little baby elephant comes out, or some little giraffe, almost has, or the moment it comes out, the woman's got to pop up and keep walking, otherwise they'll get left behind, right? So this little being pops up, and then he has to find mummy's little, you know, where, on the elephant, where the breast is for the milk. We all say that's instinct. Because if you're born as an elephant, you know where to go for the milk. Mummy doesn't have to teach you. That's instinct. Well, guess what that comes from? Habit from past lives, you know. That's why the one of reincarnation for me is about the most viable explanation of why we are anything. Where does it come from? It's not God, not mystery, not from your mother. It's habit. One way karma works is simply habit. Your mind, everything you think and do and say programs you. And you wake up next life, depending on the karma you have, to be an elephant or a lion or a human, and you have habits, and they're called instincts. So what we're trying to do is make virtue instinctive. That's basically, a Buddha is now instinctively perfect, instinctively brilliant, instinctively joyful, because you've practiced it to perfection. We see this every day in how we learn things. Yeah. Any questions, people? 3 o'clock already, my gosh. We're doing this tomorrow as well? Oh, okay. So any questions, people? What would you like to look into more? Discuss some things we've discussed already more. Maybe we can go into karma more, or whatever you want. You decide, you know, if you like. Please ask me some questions. Yeah?
Are there any questions online?
Not online, Louis.
Okay. Yeah, Barbara, a question? Yes, sweetheart.
Is it on?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
The question that I have, Venerable, is in regards to looking at things from a different perspective.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to our great teacher that you call Mr. Trump.
Okay.
I really struggle with trying to see him from a different
I
perspective.
understand. Easy. Okay, good. It's easy. So, but what your meaning is, you struggle to find good qualities there, because all you see is bad ones. That's what you're saying, isn't
Exactly.
it?
And
Okay,
I mean,
but you don't need to see good qualities in him. There's other ways of doing it. There's lots of other ways.
that's what I'm.
And this is okay. So you know from your studies of the path, the teaching about karma, cause and effect, right? You know a bit about that. That's the fundamental teaching of the Buddhas. It's the law that runs. He says it's the law that runs the universe. You know. So we've got the wisdom wing and we have the compassion wing. Okay, so from the perspective of the wisdom wing, that's all the nuts and bolts of you learning about karma, applying it to your own life, taking responsibility, stop being a victim, understand that why you do things and what you can do with that. You use it as your basis to develop Barbara. Do you understand? That's a huge one, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So now we live in this world, isn't it? So and it's a bit overwhelming sometimes. So there's different ways you can interpret the world according to what you need to be practicing. So forget compassion. Maybe you've got no space for compassion. Well, let that be yet. You've got to have karma first and understand cause and effect first. So then what you do is you say, for example, Mr. Trump, and you hear him doing his crazy things and whatever. More than karma. The whole wisdom wing is about you learning about you and your mind. That's a much better one. So you know in your mind you've identified attachment, right? You agree? You've identified anger. You've identified pride. All the delusions, you probably identified most of them. They mightn't be as bad as some people's, but you've identified them, haven't you? And when we understand the Buddha's view of the mind is that all beings in the universe, the same model applies. Monkeys and dogs and ants as well. Psychopaths and maniacs and saints. The model of the mind in Buddhism is a really crucial point. It refers to all beings. You understand me? So if you understand that model of the mind, amazing way to practice. You read the paper, you see your iPad, you do whatever you do, and you hear about Mr. Trump, or you hear about a psychopath, or you hear about a pedophile, or you anything, right? So then you go, well, that's, and you think about karma, and then immediately you have compassion from that already due to habit. This person is jumping on little girls since a tiny boy. Like one of my friends on death row in Kentucky, he tells me about one of the guys there whom I know. He says, Robina, he thinks of torture all the time. So when we understand about karma, you have that view. You know, he got born to that mother, and he's got these tendencies. His mother didn't teach him to torture. There's a karmic tendency. So straight away, you say, even forget the compassion one. The first one is you see the behavior of the world. Well, you go, well, there's anger. You see it. And you'll see maybe you'll identify Mr. Trump and his hubris, or his lying, or his stealing, or his greed, whatever you want to see there.
All of it.
Whatever you want. If you want to see it's there, fine. But bring it back to yourself and say, I recognize those. Straight away, you make it your practice. Take it away from Mr. Trump and you make it your practice. And you'll even say to yourself, thank you, Mr. Trump, for showing me my mind. Right there, you make it your practice. Because if you can't see your own sometimes, you see it in somebody else, and our first instinct is to criticize. How dare he be like that? Straight away you go, oh, I recognize that. And if you think about attachment, you recognize it. You mightn't want to dump on little boys all day, but you recognize attachment. You understand? You mightn't torture, but you recognize anger. They're all there in you. So straight away you make it your practice. It's about you, not Mr. Trump. So thank you for showing me, Mr. Trump. Very kind. And then you think, thank you for showing me how not to be. And straight away it's a teaching for you. You see?
I do.
That's immediate. Because what we tend to do is this arrogance of pointing fingers to everybody else. There are pedophiles out there. You can't argue. There are maniacs. There are deluded people. Guess what? Why are you surprised? You understand? Then the other approach, when you get karma together and you get your mind together, and that's the wisdom wing, the more you have that for yourself, then you look at other people and you see they're in the same boat. So due to karma, here's this way and that way, due to their own past actions, and that's why they're suffering, and that's why they cause suffering. So you have compassion. I mean, Mr. Trump had a mother. I'll never forget that. A pedophile has a mother. Probably the only person on the planet who loves that boy. Do you understand? And why? Do you know why? Because she can see he's harming himself. And that's the point about delusions. And that's why back in the wisdom wing, when you see that anger and depression and jealousy and anxiety and your attachment harm you, not just get guilty, but they harm you, these are why you are suffering this second. Not to mention doing actions on the basis of them and creating future suffering. But why we have suffering and pain right now is because of these delusions. So when you see that for yourself, it's easy to have compassion for the pedophile. You see my point? And if you haven't yet realized why you're suffering, then you can't have compassion for anybody else. And that means all you're doing is beating yourself up. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So the compassion for another, not just, only now, let's talk about compassion. Compassion is a more advanced level. And the only people we have compassion for are the innocent victims, aren't they? I'm only prepared to have compassion for the child who gets beaten up by a naughty person. I can only have compassion for the dog who gets hit. So it's so arrogant. It's based on our attachment, That's not compassion. And then what we do is the second we have compassion for the innocent child, we get mad at the person who did it. It turns into anger. It's really limited. So the compassion wing, we know, Buddha talks about everybody's suffering. You've got to know how and why, and you won't know it until you know it for yourself. That's why the first stages of practice come first. We miss that, What do you think renunciation is? Renunciation is you recognizing in the bones of your being the pain of these delusions. Not guilt, not beating yourself up, but that really is the meaning of self-compassion. We think self-compassion is having a massage, That's nice to have, but it's seeing the pain your delusions cause you. Then you have compassion. Then it's easy to see have compassion for others. Without it, we can't. It just becomes sentimental. So then our trouble is, we think if you have compassion for somebody, we're then saying, oh, poor thing, he can't help it, and we pat him on the head and we let him go. Well, no, you can have compassion for that python or the creature that's going to, anything, the sentient being that's going to harm another. You know why they are, driven by their delusions. But having compassion for the animal that's going to harm the other animal, or for the child who's going to harm the other child, doesn't mean you let them get away with it. That's the way we have compassion, sentimental compassion. Compassion is based on wisdom. So you'd prevent them from harming others. Of course you would. So compassion is not sentiment. Compassion is very, very powerful. The compassion we have is revolting. It's weak and pathetic and based on attachment. But real compassion is based on wisdom, and it's very powerful. You help protect the person from themselves. So I'm glad that guy I know in death row in Kentucky is on death row. I'm not glad he's on death row, but I'm glad he's locked up for his own sake. His friends won't give him the luxury of torturing them, and he can't torture anybody else. So you're protecting him from himself. That's what you do with compassion, not just sentimental. You understand me? So keep working on your own mind, honey. And when you see anger and jealousy and hubris and depression and anxiety and know they're causing you your pain, you'll be able to see it in everybody. Then, of course, on the bodhisattva path, you try to find the way to help them. If that means locking them up, then lock them up. Do you understand? And then you can apply emptiness, you can apply all the teachings that you know about. That's a different view to see. But as for, you don't, if somebody's killing somebody, you can't, seeing it differently doesn't mean saying they're not killing. That's silly. That's stupid. They are killing. You can't see that in any other, it is still killing, you understand? So if Mr. Trump is doing harm politically, let's say he is, then you can't say he's not doing that. So it's not a question of glossing it over and calling it something pretty. But you know why he's doing it. And that's also the karma. He's got half of Americans adore Mr. Trump. I think half of, at least the people who vote, isn't it? Half the people who vote at all love Mr. Trump and believe every word he says. So that's puzzling to us, but that's due to his past karma. What the kind of karma called experiences similar to the cause is the way you're seen by others. So millions of people see him in a good light, see his good qualities. Now, I admire in Mr. Trump, I think it's totally amazing. I admire his unbelievable ability to be absolutely, impervious to criticism. Most politicians, anybody would slink into the shadows and be mortally guilty and try to be hidden when they're accused of anything, but nothing stops him. I found that an astonishing quality. So courageous, I can't believe it. Do you understand? That's astonishing. But he wouldn't be able to do it if there weren't people who supported him, of course. But all these millions of people who adore him. And then there are the millions of people who see the same person who hate him. So it just shows that proves emptiness for a start. Mm-hmm. And that shows karma. So use that understanding to explain it to you, And then, of course, when you don't like that person, what arises in you, and this is the most direct teaching, is your aversion, Barbara. And aversion is the response when your attachment doesn't get what you want. Absolutely. The attachment in us is like an infant that only wants nice things. So Mr. Trump upsets our little party. Mm-hmm. Well, come on, grow up and see him for who he is and say, thanks, Mr. Trump. Do you understand me?
I do.
That's the first one to look at, baby. All attachment wants, we're like infants. We want nice things only. We have a panic attack when things come along that our attachment doesn't like. Do you understand, darling? So purposely look at him and not criticize. Do it as a practice. Do you understand?
I will. Thank you.
And, help him put his makeup on better and get him to brush his hair better and make him look nicer. He's a very unusual person, you've got to admit. Whoever he is, he's an unusual human being. He's mind-blowing, isn't he? Yes, who's got a question? Yes, go on. Terry.
The easiest way to understand all of this, which gets back to no separate self, is I could be wrong. You mentioned it in the tradition that I come from. We talk about that all the time. One of the root problems that we have right now is the divisiveness in this country.
That's right. Is this a question, Terry, or a teaching? You're very welcome to give it.
There's no difference. Huh? There's no difference.
You're giving.
But if
Terry,
Yes,
Forgive me. I'm asking you, are you going to ask me a question, or is this a little teaching you're giving us?
teaching. I want to give a teaching.
You want to give a teaching, do you?
I do.
And you think it's appropriate for you to give a teaching here?
Well, with your indulgence, with
Well, I don't have
respect to
much
you,
choice, do I? Carry up.
may I give this
If you
tiny
think
little
we,
teaching?
okay, the reason to talk is just, I mean, it's my job here, so I have to. But the reason to say anything, which means you want to give us advice, is because we don't know it. So are you sure we need your advice, that we don't have this knowledge that you want to give us? Are you sure about that?
I am.
You're really sure we don't have this knowledge? We need your wisdom, do we, Terry? So I'd suggest think about that and pass the microphone back.
I have just a teeny little bit of
We're
wisdom,
determined to do it, aren't you?
because I think it's important.
For us to hear your wisdom. Terry, I'm trying to embarrass you here, but you're not embarrassed. You're pretty
But,
good.
Mr. Trump, I'm not embarrassed because I think it's important.
Terry, for us to hear your ideas. You think that?
Yes.
Well, I think I'd like you to pass the microphone back.
All
So we already heard it. You already said it before. Thank you so much. And you're very correct. And I agree with you, and Buddha agrees too. Thank you, Terry. Any other questions? Yes. Go on then. What is it? Who? Scarlett, you go talk to me, sweetheart.
Hello, Venerable. I'm going to try to be coherent. I've been kind of trying to think about what we've been talking about all this time. So I ate my lunch and then I reflect on all the things that came together to make my lunch.
I'm sorry, Terry, Scarlett. I'm finding it difficult to hear your words. So can you say them more clearly? Because I'm a bit deaf and I haven't got my things in, you know. So say it a bit more clearly.
Yes. So I had my lunch and I was thinking, like he talked about, all the things that came together to make my lunch delicious. And I was feeling happy, joyful, good. And so the phone rings and I answer it and I'm upset. So am I supposed to think, oh, there is emptiness in that phone call? And it shouldn't.
So just say the question in another way. So ask me the question, Scarlett. What's the
So
question?
So my question is, I shouldn't be upset when I got that phone call because I was having a good time.
Okay, good. I hear your point, darling. It's not a question of shouldn't. I mean, it's like if you're learning to play tennis and you don't know very well what to do, you shouldn't say, oh, I shouldn't hit it like that. You're only a beginner. So it's not a question of shouldn't. You learn from your experience. So obviously what you just told us was the phone call caused some anger or upset to arise in your mind. So just observe it and notice that, notice that you feel there's an I there, little Scarlett got upset, and learn from it, Scarlett. So next time the phone calls and the same person, you'll be ready for it and you'll be a little less upset. That's the practice. Take it as a learning, sweetheart. Not a question of shouldn't or should. That's too heavy.
Okay,
Yes. We put it this way, of course, a person who's got some understanding of emptiness wouldn't be upset. So that's a good learning. Like Mr. Federer wouldn't play badly. He'd play brilliantly because he knows how. So you learn from it. You don't go, oh, I'm terrible. I should do it like that. That's not helpful. Learn from it, sweetheart.
Thank you.
Good, darling. Yes, hello then, Michael. Talk to me.
Thank you, Venerable. I have a question. If we have existed since beginningless time, and we will
yes,
and we will continue. Well, actually, it doesn't matter if we continue to it. What about us does not have empty? There has to be something that goes through there that has an inherent existence. What is that?
No,
or maybe
nothing.
there doesn't have to be.
The key point here, Michael, is to get in terms of understanding Buddha's analysis, we have to know what his definitions are. Somebody else in the world might use a term like inherent existence. We've got to know what Buddha means. And he says that his observation is that everything that exists, every mind, everything, every person, anything that exists can't exist without depending upon this and that. There's nothing that exists in and of itself. Everything has to be dependent. That's what he's saying. So inherent means the opposite of dependent. That's all. There can't be anything that exists that doesn't depend upon things. So just for something to exist beginninglessly and endlessly doesn't mean it's inherent. So there's an assumption, I think, that you think inherent means because it can go back, because it can exist forever, right, Michael? Is that what you're implying? Michael, turn your thing off. Unmute, darling.
Sorry. Yes. So
no, even though mind is the Buddha's view, continuity of consciousness is beginningless and endless, just because it never begins and never ends, it's still impermanent in its nature, changing from moment to moment, and still it has no intrinsic existence and is empty of existing from its own side and is a dependent arising. The fact that it can exist moment by moment means it's dependent arising. That's all he's saying, and that's what we have to get our heads around, his use of these terms, you know.
thank you.
Thank you, Michael. What else, Nina? Pick something? Okay. Pick what? Oh, thank you so much, Victor. So what other people? Got a few minutes left. Yes, darling. We have the mic, please. Yeah.
Here? Yeah. Yes. Back to the principle of emptiness. When you explain about the two bears that you had in your childhood, and
The two what?
the two little knickknacks, the little bears.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Then I think I kind of understood a little. So first, you need to recognize what you said, and then do you need to establish a relationship with the I to realize that the I, it's not there?
I don't understand the question, darling. Say it differently.
It's the same thing.
I don't understand it. Say it differently. Ask me the question differently.
For me to realize that there is not a cup, I first need to have a relationship with that thing called cup. A relationship in a sense that I needed to know that this was a cup before for me, and now it's not supposed to be anymore. I think now
So in order for you to realize there is no I from its own side, what do you first have to do? What are you telling me?
You need to have a relationship with the I before.
Yeah, I mean, all the Buddha is saying is, yes, if you are trying to establish the emptiness of an inherent cup, it's obvious the first step is to establish conventionally what it is and how it exists. Of course, absolutely, yes, exactly. Yes, exactly, you're right. So I think we can stop. I think enough today. We have plenty tomorrow, more of Lama, more of Panchen Lama, maybe even more of Terry giving us teachings. We'll give Terry a special slot and she can come up here and swap with me and give us one of her very special teachings that we must hear. Now I'm being very sarcastic, Terry. Okay. So we'll put up our little prayers, shall we? Put up our... So just this one, just thinking, you know, due to these things, I'm going to say my own words for it. Okay, first, we'll do it in Tibetan after. So due to the karmic imprints, and maybe we'll talk about tomorrow whether we like, because it's a very good example. Karma is a brilliant example of dependent arising that proves emptiness of the I. It's a great way to talk. We'll do that tomorrow. So here, due to the various karmic imprints we put into our mind just by listening to these teachings, may these ripen as our Buddhahood. So then we are able to lead all suffering sentient beings to liberation. And then the other little prayer, the swift return of Lama Yeshe, please. I forgot the Tibetan. Yeah, peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Lojang father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands. Please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice. You wore the armor of patience that's never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make this. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. Such a great loss. But nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. And then and then may His Holiness Dalai Lama and all holy beings of this, may he live long. May we all live a long life so we can be useful on this planet. I think that's all. And we'll continue tomorrow, people. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, people.
Venerable.